Hello everyone. In this video we're going to be working on a very special project. I was very fortunate that recently my father gifted me this beautiful Carpenter's tool chest, and what's special about it is that it was one of the earliest projects that was built by my grandfather after World War II. After the war, my grandfather got married, and as a young man he became an apprentice in Carpenter's local 1027, which was like a mill and cabinet division up in Chicago. And one of the earliest things he had to do as a young apprentice was make a toolbox. So this toolbox is approximately 80 years old, or it's going on about 80 years old. And the box overall is structurally in pretty good condition, but just because of the age of it, it does need some TLC. Some of the hardware on it is completely corroded. The handle on it is completely rotted away. And some of the wood is coming apart inside the shelf. There is a little bit of separation happening. And so my intention with this box is to do more of a conservation on it rather than a restoration. We want to clean it up. We want to replace the hardware that needs to be replaced and fix any wood that needs to be fixed. Some of the areas where the wood screws were concealed with plugs, those plugs have popped out, and some of the wood screws are working their way out of the box, so it is going to need some work. So we're really going to take our time on this project, and we're going to do a thorough job on it. As my grandfather progressed, he started out as an apprentice, then he was a journeyman. He went through all the ranks of his carpentry career. In later years, he was pretty particular about things when he built them, and so I feel a little bit more pressure on this project than I normally would feel working on other stuff, because I know my grandfather was a stickler for detail when he worked on a project. So hopefully we can do him justice on this one, and I'm really pleased to have this box and to put it in my workshop, and hopefully I'm going to use it for many more years to come. And looking forward to working on it, and I hope that you're going to enjoy following along on the restoration of my grandfather's tool chest. Over the past few years, my father had actually given me some of the hand tools that were in the box. These tools are actually a combination of both my great-grandfather's tools and my grandfather's tools. My great-grandfather died in 1958, and when he died, my grandfather took over whatever tools he had. So this is actually a combination of both of their tools. So there's some hand planes here. This is a Sergeant number 409. There's another one here. Says Van Camp. I know that there's a lot of guys that are into restoring these old planes. I don't know that much about them. This is a large one here. I guess my grandfather used that to plane down doors. It's a Stanley plane. I think it's a number 8. It's a pretty large one. There's a number stamper here. Number all. A feeler gauge. There's some auger bits and a Miller's Falls brace drill. Chalk line. There's a couple more block planes down there. Then there's an old draw knife, a bigger one and a smaller one back there. There's still a few chisels in here. They say Pexto. This one says Fulton, Greenlee. There's a little variety of chisels in there. There's this appears to be like a hole saw, and then here's like a rip saw, like a distance type. And the teeth on this saw, I mean, if I was to go to the store and buy a brand new saw, you wouldn't get one that was any sharper than that. And my dad said that he remembered as a kid, my grandfather would set the saw up and he would set the teeth on the saw, and then he would sharpen the teeth on it. So if you look down there, now this saw probably hasn't been used in 50 years. You could actually see how those teeth are set. So my grandfather, when he was living, he really took care of his stuff, and so it's kind of neat that saw is still so sharp after all these years. So anyways, I'm going to move the tools off to the side, and we'll take a closer look at the box itself. Almost forgot to show this little Lufkin ruler. This opens, and then there's a little caliper built in. It's beautifully made, wood, brass. Nice little piece right there. Starting from the left side of the box, if you're looking at it from the front, this side don't look too bad really. It's a little scuffed up, but nothing major there. There's one little plug that's coming out there, but nothing that appears critical. Here's the front of the box. I'm guessing that this finish on this is like a shellac. I'll have to do some tests on that in an inconspicuous area and make sure, but I'm gonna guess for the age of the box that it's probably like a shellac finish on there. Let's see, we got this brass hardware. It looks to be in pretty good shape there. So over here you can see that some of these screws are popping out here. You can see like the little plug, it's pushing out, so we'll see if we can get those back in there. Up here, you can see that the plugs have popped out and now the screws are exposed, so we'll see if we can get those fixed up. There's a little chunk missing here, and there's a little chunk missing over here. Once again, the plugs have popped out over there, so we'll work on that. One area that's a little bit more problematic is this upper corner here. If you notice this corner brace here, it's completely corroded, so that's going to have to be replaced because there's no way to clean that up. So what I'll probably do is I'll probably replace it, and I'll move one of the ones from the bottom to the top, assuming that they're the same style, and then the replacement that I put on there, I'll probably put that on the bottom behind it. I'll have to try to weather it a little bit so that the four that are exposed on the top, we'll try to keep those looking similar. And then in the back, you can see there's 3 brass hinges back there. The back looks pretty good. And then we'll open it up. Oh, here's the top. The top does have some water stains on it or some kind of staining. So we'll try to get that cleaned up there. Once again, you can see where some of the plugs have popped out here. Okay, this is what I was saying. The handle on this thing there's no salvaging that. So we're going to be putting a new handle on there. This hardware looks to be like brass. And when we open this, one thing I noticed is for some reason there doesn't appear to be a chain to hold this box from opening all the way. It might be something we add to it. Would that be sacrilegious to do that? I don't think so. You can see here the little scuff marks from the saws going in and out of there over the years. So in this corner, there's some kind of staining that's taking place there. I don't know. It looks like verdigris, like when copper oxidizes. So we'll see if we can get that cleaned up a little bit. And then here's the little shelf area for your hand tools. Now some of these areas, like if you look over here, there is a little gap in there where the wood is separating. And in the back too, it's coming apart there a little bit. Same thing over here. Here you can see where there's a little separation that's taking place. Right here you can see it. And that's not too bad over there. So we'll see if we can clean out those gaps, and then hopefully we can clamp it together and reinforce those areas where the wood is separating. The inside of the box overall looks pretty good. You know, just typical wear and tear that you would expect on a almost 80-year-old box. Here you can see some of the plugs, you know, where all the holes were plugged up. So anyways, we'll get this thing up on the workbench, and we'll start taking off some of the hardware on it and see what kind of adventure we run into doing that. Okay, so before removing the hardware, I just quickly took my Sharpie and I labeled each piece of hardware so that when I reinstall them, I could put them back in exactly the position they were in before, with the exception of the corroded one in the back, which is going to have to be swapped out. So now we'll start trying to take some of these screws out and see what kind of fun we have. One last thing before we begin actually removing these screws is I'm taking a minute and I'm going around to every screw head and I'm using my awl and I'm cleaning out the slots of the screw heads to remove any rust or gunk that's in there, because I want my screwdriver to seat fully in each one of these slots, because what I don't want to do
is strip out those heads. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to make sure there's no gunk in there. Make sure they're nice and clean. That screwdriver will fit in there real nice. And I also checked my different screwdriver heads, and I found the one that seats in those screw heads the best. So that's the one we'll use to remove these. And I'll go around and finish cleaning out those slots, and we'll get started removing the hardware. Okay, that screw is broken off in there. So I was wondering why that head was wobbly like that. So we'll have to look at that. So we have another broken off screw on the top left corner bracket. So I'll deal with those later. That's going to be a little bit tricky to get those out of there without damaging the surrounding wood. So I'll continue removing the easy to remove hardware, and I'll bring you back to any problematic areas. Found another snapped off screw head on the right rear hinge. I'll work on extracting those broken off screws a little bit later. I got it labeled where it's at. Our left hinge also has a snapped off screw head, so that makes a total of 4 that we have to remove so far. While I was removing the wooden bracket which secures the saw blades in place on the inside of the lid, I noticed that a piece of wood here was fractured. It wasn't broken off yet, but there was a little chunk that was getting ready to break its way off. So I went ahead and applied some wood glue to it, and I just got that clamped up before we proceed any further. So on this bracket here, you know, these brackets, the corner brackets themselves are not made out of solid brass, obviously, because you can see how they're all corroded. So the corrosion has locked those screw heads in place. One of them snapped off over here. The head of that one is completely gone. But on these two, I'm going to try to clean up the area surrounding the head with the Dremel, and then we'll drop a little penetrant in there and see if we can persuade those out of there. Worst case scenario, I'll cut the heads of them off and we'll have to fish them out like we're going to have to do the other ones anyway. Let's put a little wrench on that. Spray a little liquid wrench here. Just apply it with a Q-tip. that. We'll put a little bit on the broken one. Okay, I'm going to let those sit for a while. I'll keep coming back and putting a little liquid wrench on them with the Q-tip, and hopefully we can persuade them out of there. How about that? Get this one out, we'll be in business. Give this a little wrap with the hammer. Oh, we got movement. Boom. How about that? Okay, good. Got those out. Now, the real challenge. This thing is pretty much falling apart as we're moving it here. Trying not to damage the surrounding wood. Let me get a flat spatula and take that out a little more carefully. So on this last corner bracket, we were able to remove the first 2 screws, but the last one, the head snapped off, and this is all corroded together here. So I'm going to get in here with the Dremel, and I'm going to see if I can remove the last of that material, and hopefully we'll be able to persuade this last corner bracket off without damaging the areas around it. Matter of fact, I'm going to put a piece of tape on each side of that, just in case I slip with the Dremel. Won't make a gouge in the wood. Okay, let's roll with that. Pray for a little good luck. Let's see if we can get some movement out of that. Coming in from behind here very delicately. Just this flat scraper more. And that thing's on there. That thing is on there. There's really nothing to get underneath there with it. It's all rusted. I think I'm gonna have to try to tap that lightly. Let's see if I got a brass tap here. A small screwdriver, or small hammer, excuse me. Try this and see if we get a little movement out of it. Boom. How about that? Well, it broke in that one spot where it's rusted, but at least we got some of it off. Now let me flip this lid over, and I think I could just scrape the rest of that off. So that'll work out okay. I think we're good there. So using the Dremel tool, very carefully I was able to cut a little groove in that screw, and now using the screwdriver I am getting some movement out of there. So that was a pretty delicate operation right there, because I didn't want to damage the wood around that area. I got enough of it loosened up now where I should be able to get a pair of vice grips on there and pull that out. So let me do that now. Boom, just like that. So I had you zoomed in there for a second where you could see the first of the broken off brass screws we're going to attempt to remove out of that hole. The problem is it's more or less a blind hole. It's barely starting to, I can feel a dimple there, but the screw is not protruded out the back side. So the trick is going to be to back that screw out of there without pushing it through to the other side. The way that I'm going to attempt to do it is I have a small center drill there, and I'm going to chuck that up in my drill. I'm going to see if I could put a tiny dimple in that thing, and then I'm going to use some left-handed drill bits and see if I can get my drill bit to catch on that screw and back it out of there. In order to prevent that screw from pushing through to the other side, I think I'm going to make a little jig here, a little fixture. I'm going to use this behind there, and I'm going to use some clamps on it to keep pressure on the back side of that wood to help prevent that wood from pushing out while I'm working on it. So that's the approach I'm going to take to do that. There's other approaches you could take. You know, you could use these hollow type cutters and cut completely around the screw bit, but then you got to fill in the hole with a dowel, and that's going to be real ugly. I mean, I wouldn't want to do that. So I don't want to hack this thing up. I'd rather just leave it in there broken, to be honest with you, than to do an approach like that. So we're going to really take our time on this. It's going to be a little bit of a delicate operation, and hopefully we'll be able to do it without mangling things up. So let me get set up here and we'll see how it goes. So there's no way I'm going to be able to get the camera in there because it's such a small area. Plus I'd probably be blocking it anyways. So I'm just going to go for it. Got the center drill chucked up. Let's see what happens. We're going to try to put in our dimple right now. Okay, that's not bad. Better than I thought. Let me go in a little bit more with that. And we'll go in, switch over to our left-handed drill. Perfect. I'll be damned. Okay, now let me switch over drill bits to the left-handed drill. I'll bring you guys right back. I don't know if you can make that out, but you can see right in the center of that brass screw, you see our dimple? So we're going to use that to guide the left-handed drill bit. Okay, so we got our left-handed drill bit in there. And when you're running these left-handed drill bits, you got to run the drill in reverse. So we got the drill running backwards. Give it a whirl. See if we're making any progress on that. Okay, so the remnants of the screw have not backed out yet using the reverse drill. However, we're nibbling away at it, and I almost got that thing completely drilled out. You look, you can see we're way down to the end there. And most importantly, we haven't done damage to that hole. So I'm just going to keep nibbling away at it, and we may end up just drilling the entire thing out. So we're almost there now. Okay, we're going to call that a success. We got about 99% of the old material out of there. There's one little sliver left in there that's kind of embedded in the wood. I don't know if you can see it there on the left-hand side, but it's not hurting anything. If anything, it'll give a little bit of material for the screw to grip on. But the good thing is we didn't do any damage to the surrounding material, and we did the job without coming through the back. So that took about 2 hours. Now I got a couple more to go. I'm going to do the other ones in just the same approach and bring you guys back after I get those other ones drilled out. Okay, just got the last of the 4 screws drilled out, and this is the front center latch, this one right here. Took me about 4 hours to get those 4 screws drilled out of there in total. A couple of them took a little longer, a couple of them went a little bit easier. If you look here on the back side, you'll see that we did that without doing any damage back there. So that was the tricky part. So anyways, we're going to move on to the next part. Now that we have all the broken off screws drilled out, the next step in the process is I'm going to try to remove the screws that are protruding so that we can make an effort to reseat them. So we're going to start on this one right here. Now this one still has some of the either wood filler or plug attached to it, so I'm going to have to kind of chip that off so that I can get access to the slot itself. We'll try to take those out. We'll clean out the hole if we have to, and we'll try to reseat them so that they're countersunk, and then we'll have to fill those screws in when we're finished. So we're going to give that a try right now. It felt a little bit loose coming out of there, so when we reinstall that, we'll tighten that up a little bit, maybe just with a toothpick or something simple like that. So that was okay, no problem. I'll continue and get the rest of them out. You know, when you're working on a project like this, you have to make some decisions about when is enough enough. So in this particular case, you know, I'm not trying to make this box look like brand new. That would just destroy all the character and the history of the box. So these right here, you know, these are on the fence. You know, you could see a little bit of separation there, but it's still flush. Same thing with this one here. So what I'm going to do with those is I'll probably just put a little CA glue or something in there just to reinforce that, but I'm not going to chip that out of there. You know, you have to know when to say when, so to speak. So I'm only going to remove the ones that are actually sticking out, and the rest of them we'll just reinforce them and leave them where they're at. Okay, so we had a total of 8 screws that needed to be removed because the heads were protruding. So all the rest of them we left in there. Unfortunately, you can see right here, we did have one busted screw. And this one's made out of steel, not out of brass. So I got it marked over here. So we have one more that we have to drill out. Now, fortunately with this one, because the way that it's set up, okay, I don't have to worry about busting through the back side like I did on the other ones. So I'm going to set this one up in the drill press, and we're just going to try to drill that out straight away. So let's get it set up and see how it goes. Okay, we got our piece clamped down, got our center drill installed. I got the drill press just running slow, nothing too fast. We're just going to take our time, put a drop of cutting oil on here. And let's pray for a little good luck. Okay, we're hitting the screw. Just gonna get down there just a little bit. Okay. Take quick look and we'll see where we're at here. Okay. I think that was good. Call that a success. Now what I'm going to do, a little bit, this contact cleaner dries real fast. It doesn't stay on there long enough to damage the finish. Good thing about it. Alright, we're going to go one drill size larger. Finish that hole out. Call that done. Okay, I just made a test with one of our good screws to make sure everything was okay, and that screw drew down nice and tight, so we're going to call that a success. Now that we have the most tedious aspects of the project finished, especially drilling out those broken off screws, I'm going to go ahead with the general cleaning. And to do that, especially if you notice the top of that box is pretty dirty, so that's going to need a little bit of work. As I said before, you know, we're not trying to make this thing look like brand new. We're trying to preserve it, but at the same time, it does need to be cleaned. So I just got a little bit of Dawn dish soap and some warm water. I do have a little simple green there, nothing harsh, you know, no solvents or anything like that. And we'll give it a basic cleanup, and we'll see how it goes. You know, I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place with the very top of this box. If you'll recall, the top of this box had some very bad staining in this area here. And that staining has penetrated deep into the grain of the wood. You know, I tried a little barkeeper's friend on there. Sometimes that'll help to remove stains out of wood. And the only way to get rid of that staining really would be to sand down the whole top. But the problem with that is, you know, I don't want to sand away the history of the box. You know, the purpose of this restoration is to do like a conservation, and I'm not trying to make the box look like brand new. You know, that would be a shame. So if you look here, there's a lot of little marks and dings that the box has picked up over the years, and I certainly wouldn't want to sand that away. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this area here a light sanding, just to try to take up a little bit more of that stain just in the stained area itself, not here, not where we have the patina. I don't want to sand that off, but just in the stained area I'm going to try to sand that a little bit more. And then what I'll probably do just for the top is I'll probably give the whole top a coat of like a golden oak type of a stain to kind of blend it together a little bit, maybe cover that up just a little bit before we put a coat of shellac on there. You know, I won't have a choice but to put at least one coat of shellac over the box, just because there was no way around it with this heavy staining. That had to be worked on a little bit there. So I think that's the way we're going to approach it. We'll see how it turns out. So I ended up using an oak colored gel stain, and those gel stains, you know, they conceal defects a little bit better than like a penetrating stain. So it's not going to be perfect, okay, and we're not looking for perfection, but what I was trying to do is trying to make that stained area a little bit more subtle. Now the top is still wet, so of course it's shinier than the rest of the box, but you get the idea. I think I'm going to leave it right there. I'm not going to apply any more. All I'm trying to do is just blend it in a little bit better. We still got all of our imperfections in there. You know, we didn't cover any of that up. I think that's going to be a good compromise right there. So I'm real happy with that. I think given what we had to work with, that's about the best case scenario right there. Let that dry. I'm also going along and carefully removing these little spatters of white paint that are on there. Nothing major, just the ones that'll come off, I'm taking them off. If they won't come off without a lot of work, I'm gonna leave them on there. Got a little barkeeper's friend working in the bottom there. Made up a little slurry, just put it over the dark areas, let it set for about 30 minutes, see if it lightens any of that up. Whatever remains after that is gonna remain. So we'll wait 30 minutes and clean it up, see what we got. While we're working on some of the other parts of the project, I have the steel parts. Some of them are brass plated, like the corners and a couple of the latches and the screws that we removed. I got those soaking in some evapor rust. Evapor rust works a lot better if it's warm. So I got the pan sitting on top of a heating pad, and by warming that up, the evapor rust definitely works better. Anyways, we're not trying to shine up those parts. You know, I'm not going to polish them or anything like that. We're not trying to make them look new, but I do have to remove the heavy corrosion off of them. So at least I could put a little dull coat on them or something, and hopefully we can prevent them from corroding any further. So they're sitting in there right now, and we'll pull them out in maybe 8 hours or so. Okay, I mentioned before that there's a couple little spaces. There's one there, and there's one there. I tried clamping it to see if I could draw those spaces closer together, but it's really not doing it. The only way that I could get those together is I'd have to dig out these screws and kind of disassemble it and then redo it. But you know, that is beyond the scope of what we're trying to do with this box. So like I said, I'm not trying to make the thing look like brand new. I'm trying to do the minimum amount of work to bring the box back to a nice preserved state. So as far as these are concerned, I mean, it's solid, okay? I mean, there's a space in there, but it's not loose or anything. So you know what, we're just gonna let that be. And I'm starting to go ahead and reinstall some of the screws that we took out of this, the body of the box itself. In those areas, I'm just putting a piece of toothpick with a little bit of hide glue in there, just for a little extra strength in there. And we'll countersink those screws, and then we'll have to refill those screws in there. So that's what I'm working on right now. Get that below the surface just a hair so we can fill it in, just like that. Wipe off that excess with the rag. Good to go. Nice thing about that hide glue, it cleans up real easy with just a little water. Let that dry. We're making nice progress on the hardware. I still have a couple more corner pieces soaking in the evapor rust. Everything has been cleaned. I used the carding wheel, which I've shown in other videos, which is like a piece of 4/0 steel wool basically. Anyways, nothing has been polished, just cleaned, and I hit them with a little clear coat because some of these brass coated steel pieces, trying to prevent the corrosion from reoccurring on there. Now what we're going to do is I have to replace that one corner piece that was corroded, so we're going to start weathering that one to make it look more like these other ones. So that's going to be the next part of the project. The first step in beating up our piece a little bit is going to be running it through this wire wheel. Try to scuff up the surface a little bit so it's not so shiny. Alright, we're going to give this thing a poor man's brass plating by heating it up and using a solid brass wire wheel in the Dremel. to rub off some of the finish on there. Heat this up a little. Tell you, that little trick works pretty good. Not perfect, but for what we're doing, it'll be alright. That'll do it right there. Now we're going to add a little rust to that, and we'll do that chemically. We're going to call that good. Alright, so we got the original on the left and our reproduction piece on the right. I think that'll work out just fine. I realized after pulling these pieces out of the evapor rust that a second corner bracket is also severely corroded. If you look there, you see how that's eaten away. But I only want to replace any hardware that absolutely has to be replaced. Otherwise it would defeat the purpose of a conservation. So I'm going to try to restore this corner piece. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to trace out a good end right there on the brass, and I'm going to cut a piece out of brass, and then I'm going to epoxy it inside there underneath that to kind of strengthen that a little bit, and then we'll grind that to shape. I might use the die filer or the Dremel for that, and then we'll weather it as necessary and see if we can strengthen that up a little bit and reuse this piece. So let's get started. So I had to hit this thing with the wire wheel to knock off the heavy corrosion that was on there. Even after the evapor rust, there was still quite a bit remaining. So what I'm going to do with this is, the first step I'm going to do is I'm going to do the poor man's brass plating in the same way I did it on the other piece that I already showed. The reason why I'm doing that first is because once I epoxy the supporting piece underneath here, I won't be able to heat that up with the torch to apply the brass, and I want this to be the same color as the other pieces. So we're going to go ahead, we'll artificially apply our brass plating, and then we'll go ahead and cut this piece out and epoxy it underneath there. So I'm going to do that now. I'll just do it off camera because I already showed it on the last corner part. I'm going to do it the same way. Okay, so I hit that with the Dremel just a little bit to smooth that out right before I put that plating on there. Alright, we got our Starrett carbide scriber here. We're gonna trace this thing out here on one of the good sides. Alright, so I did a quick test cut on both the scroll saw and the bandsaw. I'm gonna roll with the bandsaw on this just because it does not reciprocate. Consequently, there's less movement of the workpiece as I'm using it. I got a pretty fine blade on the bandsaw, and I do have it slowed down from what you would use for wood cutting. And I got my guide lifted up just a hair so I could see the workpiece a little bit better. We're going to give it a go and see what happens. Alright, so we're over here at the old Sprunger die filer. You know, this is one of those machines that you don't use all the time, but when you need it, man, it sure is nice to have it. That's what we ended up with. I'd call that a success right there. So I'm going to take some JB weld and I'm going to epoxy that inside the piece for some support. Then we'll do some final shaping. We got to drill a hole in there, and then we'll do some weathering. Alright, so here's our corner bracket after we epoxied that little brace in there. See it there. We'll let that dry and we'll do a little more shaping on that. Maybe add a little bit of JB Weld into that area there where it's kind of eating away, and we'll give it a little weathering, see what happens. Alright, I got the corner bracket screwed down to a scrap piece of wood to use as a fixture to hold it down while we're drilling it. Got our center drill chucked up in there. We'll put a little center in there and then we'll go through with it. It's a number 26 drill bit was the best size that fit that hole, so that's what we're going to roll with. Okay, there's the arm we restored. I think it came out looking pretty good. By the time you put that on there, nobody will be the wiser. We got all of our screws back in. Got them filled up with a little glue and sawdust mixture. After that dries, we'll stain it up. Making good progress.
So the interior of the box didn't really have any shellac on it. It's just pretty much natural wood. So all I'm going to do inside the box is just wipe down a little boiled linseed oil on it, and that's it. Nothing inside the box because there wasn't anything on there originally. The outside of the box, as we talked about earlier, was coated in a coat of shellac. Because we had to repair the damage on the top of the box, and we put that coat of glaze on there, at that point we committed to having to give the outside of the box a coat of shellac, because that glazing that you're seeing on the top of the box, it doesn't offer any protection in and of itself. So we're going to give the entire box a coat of shellac on the outside, boiled linseed oil on the inside, and that's it. We'll start putting it back together. So I'm going to start with the linseed oil inside the lid right now and get the inside of the box coated up. Then we'll start putting some shellac on the outside. Alright, so I'm just going to wipe on a coat of shellac using a microfiber towel. This is natural colored shellac, what's called amber. That's the natural color of shellac. If you buy shellac that's clear, it's been altered, bleached to make it clear. So we're just going to use the natural color, and I'm just going to put it on there. And if you notice, there's some runs and stuff like that on the box. Those were already there. So we're just going to leave them right there and coat right over it. So let's get started. The shellac sets up pretty quick, so you got to move fast when you're working with it, because it starts to get tacky very, very fast. But anyways, beautiful. Now I'm just taking a piece of 4/0 steel wool and just kind of knocking off any areas that are a little too glossy. Call that good.
You know, I had been keeping my eyes open for a beautiful leather handle to replace the one on the top of the box, and I was lucky enough to find an online seller who had these. Right, look at the manufacture date on that, July 1945. Okay, these are new old stock leather handles made in the USA, right there in Chicago. Okay, this thing's still in its original packaging, never been opened. So what we're going to do is we're going to open this up. We're going to put a little bit of Hubbard's shoe grease on there just to give it a little bit of nourishment. And that's going to be our handle. Wait till you see this thing. It's really beautiful. I was lucky to find these. I actually bought 2 of them. Got a backup.
This was a special project for me, and I hope that you enjoyed following along. I took my time on it. You know, I really worked to try to keep the history of the box, but to preserve it and fix any damage that needed to be repaired, and I think that we accomplished those goals. I think if my grandfather was around today, he'd be happy with the box and the way that it turned out. So anyways, we look forward to making the next video. Thank you for following along with me on this one. Take care.